Fort Dix, New Jersey. A federal motion drops on a Wednesday morning, gets to TMZ before lunch, and by sundown the timeline is doing what the timeline does, laughing at the wrong thing. Y'all locked in on Cuba. The lawyers locked in on something else entirely. Watch where the magician's other hand goes, because somebody behind a bunk bed and a barbed wire fence is still filing paperwork, like he's at his desk on West 33rd. And the request? It's not the punchline most folks think it is. Real quick before we get into it, hit that subscribe, ring the bell, drop a like if you're vibing. Y'all already know we go deeper than the headline here. Stick with me, because the angle on this one ain't trending yet, and I want you ahead of the curve when it does. So here's the actual frame. Sean Combs, Diddy, Puff, Brother Love, take your pick. Currently 50 months deep into federal sentence at Fort Dix after Judge Arun Subramanian handed down 4 years and 2 months in October 2025. And from inside that facility, his legal team just filed a motion in the Southern District of New York pushing back on Rodney, Lil Rod Jones, the producer whose $30 million civil suit kicked the door in on this whole era back in February of 2024. The new ask is two-pronged. Don't make us answer questions about Cuba Gooding Jr. and force Lil Rod to hand over his medical records on terms we approve. That's the move. That's what landed Tuesday night into Wednesday. Now look closer. Combs' team described the producer's discovery requests as abusive and improper. Those are the exact words on the paper. That's lawyer speak with weight on it. You don't drop abusive in a motion casually. It's a flag you wave when you want a judge to read the next paragraph in a certain tone. Then there's the November release language. Diddy's filing says Lil Rod was supposed to sign off on a release to provide access to his medical records back in November, but the release provided was not in compliance with regulations related to the privacy of such records. Translation, in plain English, HIPAA. Somebody sent over a release form. The other side said, nah, this form doesn't match federal privacy rules. Redraft it. That's the entire fight in one sentence. The press is reading it like Lil Rod refused. He didn't refuse. He pushed back on the form. And on the Cuba angle, per the same TMZ report, Combs' team argued that seeking information about the alleged conduct or statements of third parties, like Cuba, is improper. That's the line everyone's chewing on. Okay, one word noted. The New York Daily News confirmed the basics in a same-day write-up, noting Combs is now 56, sitting in Fort Dix, and reminding everyone Cuba, the Oscar winner, hasn't been charged with any crime tied to the suit. That last detail matters more than it looks. We'll come back to it. One more thing from the record. Combs' lead attorney, going back to the earliest TMZ coverage, called the lawsuit nothing more than a transparent attempt to garner headlines. Same wording. Same recycled denial. They've been running that play since the Cassie filing. Same script. Different defendant. Half a laugh. Moving on. Here's where it gets uncomfortable for Diddy's side, and almost nobody is putting these dates next to each other. February 26th, 2024. Lil Rod files. Sexual assault, sexual harassment, drugging, threats, all of it. Producer credit on the Love album. Off the Grid, the Grammy-nominated comeback record. Lived inside the camp. Traveled with him. Was the de facto videographer. According to Hollywood Reporter's breakdown of the complaint, Combs allegedly stiffed him on roughly $50,000 plus royalties and publishing on a Grammy-nominated record. 50 grand. A man with $1 billion with a B net worth at the time, allegedly clipping a producer for 50. That number is going to matter in a minute. March 25th, 2024. Homeland Security raids Diddy's homes in LA and Miami. Wall-to-wall TV coverage. March 26th, 2024. The very next day, Lil Rod amends the complaint and adds Cuba Gooding Jr. as a co-defendant. Same week as the raids. Reported by the LA Times and NBC News in tandem. Whether that timing was strategic or coincidental, you decide. I have a guess. March 24th, 2025. Almost exactly a year later, Judge J. Paul Oetken slices the case in half. The RICO claim gone. Breach of contract gone. 3 flavors of emotional distress gone. The Trafficking Victims Protection Act claim against Combs Global gone. What survived? Sex trafficking against Sean personally. sexual assault, premises liability, the body of the case, the spine, the part that hurts. Same opinion. Oetken pulls out a warning to counsel, aimed at Lil Rod's attorney Tyrone Blackburn, calling his filings replete with inaccurate statements of law, conclusory accusations, and inappropriate ad hominem attacks. Direct quote from the judge. That detail is sitting in the record like a loaded weapon. Diddy's team has been pointing at that line for 15 months. You're going to see them point at it again. July 2025, verdict. Acquitted on the big charges. Convicted under the Mann Act, the 1910 law. The New York Times took time to explain at the sentencing phase. October 3rd, 2025, sentenced. 50 months. Fort Dix. November 2025, somewhere in that window. Diddy's team sends the first medical records release. Per his own filing, it gets rejected on HIPAA grounds. June 11th, 2026, yesterday, they refile, with the Cuba detour stapled on top. Look at the shape of that. The medical records demand isn't new. It's been bouncing around discovery since November. What's new is the timing of going public with it. They waited until they could package it with the Cuba refusal. Why? Because Cuba is a heat shield. Cuba is the headline. The medical records are the actual play. That's what I want y'all to track. I had to read the discovery request twice to be sure I wasn't projecting, because honestly the way the press framed it, you'd think Lil Rod was trying to drag Cuba into a deposition for fun. He's not. Cuba is a named co-defendant. Has been since March 2024. The yacht incident is in the complaint. Specifically, Lil Rod alleges Cuba assaulted him aboard a vessel Combs had rented. So asking Diddy what he saw, heard, or knew about Cuba's conduct on that boat isn't fishing. That's textbook discovery in a multi-defendant suit. Diddy's team calling that improper is them treating a legally normal request like a tabloid stunt. The judge knows the difference. The headlines won't. Cuba, for his part, told the Miami Herald there were probably 300 people on the boat that day, which is, a number. A choice of a number. We'll let that one breathe. Side detail, nobody's connecting back to it. In October 2025, a civil court ordered Cuba to pay $329,750, $200,000 of that in punitive damages, in a completely separate 2019 NYC bar case where a jury believed the woman accusing him of groping. Different case. Different facts. Same defendant. Same pattern of allegation. That's not a smoking gun. That's a footnote with weight on it. Now the medical records. What's a medical records discovery request actually for in a sexual assault civil suit? Two surface reasons, one buried one. Surface reason A, corroborating physical injury at the time of the alleged assault. Surface reason B, confirming psychiatric treatment that ties to claimed emotional damage. Buried reason, combing through years of prescriptions, mental health history, addiction history, anything you can put in front of a jury to ding the plaintiff's credibility. That third one is the goal 8 times out of 10. Ask any civil defense lawyer over a beer. They'll tell you. So the fight over the HIPAA release isn't bureaucratic. It's territorial. The first release Diddy's team allegedly sent, per their own characterization, was an open door. Lil Rod's side, per the implication of his attorney's pushback, wanted a narrower one. Records tied to the alleged assaults. Not his entire chart from age 12. That's a legitimate, common, judge-resolvable scope fight. It is not, repeat, is not, Lil Rod hiding something. Anybody framing it that way is leaning on a vibe instead of the procedural reality. Quiet pause on that, because the comment section is going to want to make it about whether Lil Rod has something to hide. He might not. The filing doesn't tell us that. The filing tells us as lawyers know what release language to reject. Two very different stories. TMZ ran it as a Diddy on the offensive story. They're framing. He's pushing back, he's still in the fight. That headline angle benefits Combs' camp, and historically, Diddy's people have been very good at making TMZ the first call. Not an accident. The New York Daily News, to their credit, anchored the same story to the broader picture. The Fort Dix sentence, the 100-plus lawsuits, the recent filing from a man who alleges he was a minor at the time of abuse. Same facts, completely different gravity. Diddy's camp doesn't love that angle. It puts the Cuba question in a long line of questions instead of treating it like a one-off PR brush fire. Yahoo and AOL syndicated the basics without much interrogation, quoted the abusive and improper line, quoted the HIPAA point, moved on. That's not journalism's fault. That's the speed of a news cycle. But notice what happens. The language Diddy's lawyers chose. Abusive, improper, transparent attempt to garner headlines. Gets recycled across 5 outlets in 12 hours, and by tomorrow that's the vibe of the story, even though it's nothing but a defense team's adjective choice. The counter take I've already seen surfacing on the Bird app and on hip-hop forums goes something like, if Lil Rod's got nothing to hide, just hand the records over. I get the instinct. It's wrong, but I get it. Civil discovery has rules specifically so that defendants can't go on fishing expeditions with people's private medical history. The whole reason HIPAA exists is to stop exactly the move Diddy's team appears to be making. Refusing an overbroad release isn't a confession. It's basic lawyering. Anyone telling you otherwise is selling something, or hasn't sat through a deposition. Real talk. Y'all see how clean the framing flip is though. Same paper, 2 interpretations, completely different villain. Here's what I think is actually happening, and I want to be careful with this, because I'm reasoning, not reporting. Diddy is sitting in Fort Dix with a federal appeal that's already on a fast track. Opening brief due late December. Government response in February. His criminal lawyers want him out. His civil lawyers, separate team, are working a different angle entirely. Contain the civil docket. Because here's the math. The BBC has now put the count at over 100 lawsuits accusing Combs of sexual misconduct. And TMZ just reported a new filing this week from a man alleging he was a minor at the time of abuse. 100. That's not a number, that's a runway. Lil Rod's case isn't the biggest financial thread in that pile, but it's the first. It's the test case. Whatever depositions, whatever document productions, whatever sworn statements get pulled out of Sean Combs in Jones versus Combs become discoverable, citable, and weaponizable for the next 99 plaintiffs in line. Every minute Diddy spends under oath in this case is ammunition for every other case. Every email turned over here lives in the record forever. So what does the defense actually want? They want to stall the deposition calendar. They want to narrow the witness list. They want to keep him from having to answer a single question about anyone else in his orbit, including Cuba, including Justin, including the chief of staff Christina Coram, who's also being sued. The medical records demand serves 2 of those goals at once. It gives them an offensive document fight to chew through the calendar, and if they win it broad, it gives them a credibility weapon at trial. The Cuba refusal serves the third, keeping the deposition scope tight. That's not me reading tea leaves. That's the standard playbook for a civil defendant who's already taken a criminal hit and is bleeding plaintiffs. You don't fight every battle. You fight the calendar. Plant that idea and watch what happens over the next 60 days. If they file 3 more discovery objections that all happen to land on different third parties, Justin, Coram, Lucian Grange, all named in the original complaint per the Digital Music News PDF, you'll know I called it. Quiet sympathy for the defense lawyers, though. They're doing the job. The job is just brutal because the client made it brutal. The angle Diddy's camp is selling. That Lil Rod is grandstanding. That this is a money grab. That the whole thing is pure fiction, per the attorney quote, that's now been recycled in 5 outlets. That's the exact same script they ran on Cassie Ventura in November 2023. We know how that one ended. Diddy settled with Cassie within 24 hours of her filing. That settlement happened before any of us saw the hotel hallway footage. The money grab, line aged like milk on a radiator. So forgive me for not taking the same talking point seriously the second time. Also, and this is the part the Diddy faithful won't want to sit with, Lil Rod kept the work. He kept the Rolling Stone interview. He has, per his own attorney's filing, claimed to possess video recordings made because Combs required him to record everything. The judge in March 2025 didn't dismiss the assault claims. The criminal jury didn't acquit on everything. There's a paper trail, a video trail, an audio trail, a financial trail, and a witness trail. The defense knows that. The medical records demand is what you do when the rest of the trail isn't bending your way. That's the part of the story the press is too rushed to write. Within the next 60 days, expect a discovery dispute, hearing in front of Judge Oetken. Same judge from the March 2025 dismissal, where the hyposcope question gets argued in open court. Combs' side will lean hard on the abusive and improper framing. Lil Rod's side, assuming Blackburn has learned anything from his earlier warning to counsel, will keep it narrow and let the judge do the work. My read, Oetken splits it. He grants medical records narrowly tied to the alleged incidents and time frames. He denies the broad sweep. Diddy's team gets a partial when they'll spin as a total one, and the press will print exactly that. Now flip the table. There's a real chance Lil Rod's camp comes back with their own discovery bomb, and this is the path nobody's drawing yet. Once you're in a HIPAA fight, you can argue that the defendant's own medical and psychiatric records are relevant if intoxication, capacity, or admitted drug use is at issue. Combs has, in the public criminal record, admitted to long-running substance issues. That door, once it's pushed, can swing both ways. Watch how fast the medical records argument cools off if Lil Rod's team threatens to subpoena Combs'. The whole demand evaporates by Thanksgiving. 5 years out. And this is where my crystal ball gets cloudy on purpose. The aftershock isn't about Lil Rod or Cuba. It's about how the civil discovery record from Jones versus Combs becomes a public archive that every subsequent plaintiff cites. The names exposed in depositions. The third-party witnesses pulled in. The text messages produced. Once that record exists, the rest of the 100-plus lawsuits don't need to start from scratch. They build on this one. That's why Diddy's team is fighting this paper by paper, line by line, release by release. Not because Lil Rod's case is the biggest. Because Lil Rod's case is the foundation everyone else builds on. The opposition is going to say I'm reaching. I might be. But abusive and improper wasn't picked by accident. The Cuba angle wasn't bundled with the medical records demand by accident, and the timing, 3 weeks before the appellate briefing schedule kicks into gear, wasn't picked by accident either. Nothing about this filing is accidental. That's the whole point of paying lawyers. What Diddy pays his. That's the read. Hit subscribe if you want the next breakdown when the discovery hearing date drops, because when that hearing happens, the framing war goes from skirmish to full battle, and I want y'all in the room with me. Like the video, ring the bell, leave your take in the comments. I read him. Y'all keep this whole thing moving. Talk soon.